In this lecture, we will learn about socket programming. Sockets are used to send messages across a network. They are used for what is known in the industry as IPC, inter-process communication. Perhaps the most common use of sockets is for communication between a client and a server. There are two main protocols that we talk about when sending messages across a network. They are TCP and UDP. TCP is the transmission control protocol. It is reliable and has in-order delivery. UDP stands for User Datagram Protocol. It is not reliable, but it is faster than TCP. If a bank is sending information about a client's account between the client and server, they would use TCP to ensure the information is accurately transmitted. If a fast-paced online game is sending data between its client and server, it would use UDP because it would be more disruptive to have a slower transmission than to be slightly inaccurate. Let's talk about how a client and server communicate on a system. The server socket listens for connections from client sockets. It accepts a client. The client connects to the server. At this point, something important happens. We call it the client-server handshake, and it is a three-way handshake that takes place. To ensure that both parties can send and receive messages, the client sends a sample message, which the server receives. Then the server sends the client a message, which the client receives. Finally, the client sends one more message to complete the handshake, showing the server that it got its message. The two communicate per the code in the program. Once communication is complete, both the client and the server close their sockets. To work with sockets in Python, we can use the socket module. Up at the top of the code, let's import the socket module. Next, we will create two constant variables. Let's create a variable named host and set it equal to 127.0.0.1. This is a typical example host that is used for testing communications. Then we will set the port equal to 3000. Note that the port has to be above 1023, because 1023 and below are known as privileged ports, which are reserved for special uses. Now we need to write some server code in Python that will start up a server socket. We will type with socket.socket and pass in socket.afinet as the first argument, and socket.sockstream as the second argument. Then we will use the as keyword and specify an alias of s, so that we can refer to this socket for the rest of our program by just typing the letter s. Indented underneath our with statement, we will call s.bind and pass in host as the first argument, and port as the second argument. After that, we will call s.listen. Then we will create variables con and addr, which stand for connection and address respectively. We will set these equal to s.accept. Then we will type with con. Inside of the with statement, we will print out the string connected to, and then the address. After that, we will force an infinite loop by typing while true. Inside of the while loop, we will set data equal to con.receive and pass in 1024. If there is not data, we break. Else, we send all of the data through the connection. Okay, now we want to start up the server. Let's open up a command line. We will change directories to the folder that has our Python file in it. To do this, we type cd and then the path to that directory. Then we will type python and then example.py, the name of the file, and the py file extension. When we run the code, notice that the terminal appears to hang. This is great. It means that our server has successfully started and is listening for connections. Now we want to comment out the server portion of the code, but leave the import, host, and port lines. Time to write the client code. We will type with socket.socket and pass in socket.afinet as the first argument, and socket.sockstream as the second argument, and then use the as keyword and the alias s. Inside of this with statement, we will call s.connect and pass in host and port. Then we will call s.sendAll and send a binary string with the text "if you are seeing this, client and server have connected." Then we will create a data variable and set it equal to s.recv and pass in 1024. Finally, we will print out received and then the data. When we run this code, you will notice two things happen. First, the server accepts the connection, as we can see from a printout in the command line. Second, the client prints out the message "if you are seeing this, client and server have connected." Great job! You just learned how to use socket programming to get a client and server to communicate. In the next lecture, we will learn about multithreading.